In the world of The Sopranos, Paulie Walnuts and Silvio Dante sit at the same table almost every time we see them. They play cards together, they eat together, they laugh at the same jokes, and they serve the same boss. On the surface, they look like two loyal old school soldiers, almost interchangeable in the way they orbit Tony Soprano. But when you look closer at their scenes, at the way they look at each other, complain about each other, and still stand next to each other when things get ugly, a more complicated picture appears. Their dynamic is a quiet thread that runs through the whole series, and it tells us a lot about how power, friendship, and resentment work in that world. Both men come from the old days, and that shared past is a big part of why they can never completely hate each other. They remember a time before the modern crew, before the young guys, when the people at that table were different, and the business was rougher and smaller. We don't get a full history lesson, but we understand that both Paulie and Silvio paid their dues long before the first episode. They were there with Tony when he was still coming up. They saw him become the boss. That shared background creates a kind of deep, automatic respect. Each of them knows the other has killed for the family, has done time, has survived long enough to be middle-aged in a line of work where most men die young. At the same time, that shared history also creates competition. These are two men who both think of themselves as the real thing, as true gangsters with old-school values. Paulie shows this with his constant talk about respect, his obsession with rules, and his pride that he came up the hard way. Silvio shows it more quietly in the way he knows every rule, every tradition, every story about how the bosses before them handled things. Each of them thinks of himself as the man who really understands the life, and that means each of them silently measures the other. Their official roles inside the crew help shape their feelings. Silvio is the consigliere, the advisor. His job is to think, to balance emotions, to remind Tony of the rules and the long-term picture. Paulie is a capo, a crew leader, a man closer to the street. His job is to collect money, push his guys, and make sure fear stays out in front. Right away, this creates a tension. Silvio is allowed to sit closer to Tony's ear. Paulie, even if he is older, is technically under Tony's orders and outside of that inner two-man circle where the big decisions are made. On some level, Paulie resents that. On another level, Silvio doubts Paulie's ability to see the big picture and worries about the trouble he causes. When we see them together, the first thing that stands out is how different their temperaments are. Paulie is loud, emotional, and dramatic. He changes moods in a second. One moment he is laughing and telling a story, the next he is paranoid and offended because someone did not show him enough respect. Silvio is the opposite. He is controlled, measured, and careful with his words. He can get angry, but his anger comes out as a cold judgment rather than pure emotion. This difference pulls them apart and holds them together at the same time. Paulie brings energy and fear. Silvio brings stability and logic. Tony needs both, and each man knows the other fills a role that he himself cannot fill as well. There are many scenes where Silvio ends up acting like the buffer between Tony and Paulie. When Paulie is feeling neglected, when he is angry because Tony praised someone else, or when rumors reach him that Tony has been talking behind his back, Silvio often becomes the man who tries to calm things down. He listens to Paulie's complaints, he gives small explanations, and he sometimes tells Paulie what he wants to hear so that he does not do something stupid. This shows a kind of tired affection. Silvio may find Paulie childish at times, but he still cares enough to keep him from hurting himself. Paulie, for his part, tends to see Silvio as the company man, the guy who always takes Tony's side and never fully complains out loud. Underneath that, there is both respect and envy. Respect because Paulie understands that Silvio is smart and steady, and that Tony trusts him. Envy because that trust gives Silvio a place Paulie will never get. Paulie can hope to be the top earner, the most feared street figure, but he will never be the voice in Tony's ear the way Silvio is. Over time, that invisible gap becomes part of their dynamic. Paulie is always performing, always trying to remind the room of his value. Silvio is always quietly present, sure of his place, which sometimes irritates Paulie even if he does not say it directly. One good example of how their differences play out is the whole mess with the joke about Johnny Sack's wife. Paulie, craving attention and desperate to feel close to power in New York, lets that joke slip to the wrong ear. The result is almost a war. Silvio understands the danger from the moment it becomes an issue. To him, a joke is never just a joke. It is an insult that can shift alliances and start bloodshed. We don't see Silvio explode at Paulie, but we can feel his disgust in the way he talks about the situation. From Silvio's point of view, this is exactly what he fears about Paulie, a need for validation that can put the whole family at risk. From Paulie's side, he probably tells himself he was just talking, just doing what everyone does. Even if he feels guilt, he will never fully admit that his insecurity caused the problem. That gap in how they see the same event tells us a lot about why Silvio both respects and distrusts him. They share real moments of warmth too, and those are important for understanding their feelings. At the card table, at Satriali's, or in the back room at the Bing, they laugh at the same stories. They break each other's balls frankly and comfortably. There are times when Paulie's jokes are aimed at Silvio, and Silvio just smirks, because he understands that this is how Paulie shows he feels close. When the crew is relaxed, when money is flowing and nobody is in immediate danger, they come across like old friends who have spent decades in the same smoky rooms. But in a world like theirs, stress brings out the cracks. One of the clearest ways we see their dynamic is in how they react when things go wrong, when money is short or when war with the other side becomes likely. Silvio's instinct is always to calm the waters. He advises Tony to think, to delay, to avoid moves that could start a bigger mess. Paulie's instinct is almost always to hit back hard, to demand respect through violence, or to squeeze more money out of people weaker than him. This difference leads to small clashes in the way they talk about problems. Silvio may roll his eyes when Paulie suggests some cruel or short-sighted move. Paulie may grumble that Silvio is soft or too worried about politics. An important part of their relationship lies in how they react to betrayal and disloyalty. Both men value loyalty, but they define it differently. Silvio treats loyalty as something that includes loyalty to the rules and to the structure. You do not just stay loyal to Tony, you stay loyal to the idea of the family and how it is supposed to work. Paulie treats loyalty in a more personal and emotional way. He expects people to show him respect because of his rank and his history, and he expects his boss to make him feel secure and valued. When Paulie feels slighted, he looks for someone to blame. Sometimes that suspicion turns towards Silvio because Silvio is the man who is always in the room when Tony makes choices. This comes out in small moments where Paulie hints that things ain't what they used to be, or where he complains that his share is not big enough. He never openly accuses Silvio of being against him, but Silvio represents the system in Paulie's mind. So when Paulie rants about the way things are run, part of that anger is also pointed, even if indirectly, at Silvio. Silvio, on the other hand, seems to see Paulie as someone who has to be managed, like a powerful but unstable tool. He knows Paulie is dangerous and effective. He also knows Paulie's paranoia and pride can make him unpredictable. Silvio's respect for Paulie is real, but it is the respect you give a loaded gun. You are glad to have it when you need it, but you also make sure the safety is on. We also see their bond in the way they stand together when the crew faces outside threats. When New York puts pressure on them, when internal traitors appear, or when the feds close in, both men instinctively close ranks. Whatever small resentments exist between them, they are pushed aside when the survival of the crew is at stake. In war council meetings, Silvio and Paulie usually end up on the same side of one simple truth: Tony must be protected, and the family as they know it must be preserved. Silvio speaks in calm, organized sentences, Paulie speaks in raw emotion, but the basic loyalty is shared. In those moments, you sense a kind of love, not in a soft way, but in the sense of men who have lived through fires together and know that they cannot imagine that life without the other at that same table. Their different reactions to Tony's struggles also reveal how they feel about each other. As Tony becomes more unstable, more depressed, and more paranoid, Silvio often tries to protect both Tony and the structure around him. He tries to keep the business running. He tries to stop rash violence. Paulie, meanwhile, feels the change in Tony as a personal threat. When Tony is cold toward him, Paulie panics. When Tony questions his loyalty, Paulie spirals. In these moments, Silvio and Paulie are almost playing opposite roles inside the same man's orbit. Silvio the soothing advisor, Paulie the loud reminder that fear still rules their world. Silvio does not always defend Paulie. There are times when he is frustrated and openly critical. He knows that Paulie's loose talk with outsiders, his greed and his constant need for reassurance create problems. And yet Silvio rarely pushes for Paulie's removal. That alone says something about his deeper feelings. He would rather work harder to manage Paulie than imagine a world where Paulie is gone. Part of that may be practical. Paulie brings in money and inspires fear, but part of it feels emotional as well. There is a comfort in familiar chaos. Silvio understands Paulie even when he annoys him, and in their world understanding is rare and valuable. Paulie, too, shows his feelings in the way he reacts when Silvio is in danger. The show does not give us huge, dramatic speeches where Paulie cries over Silvio, but we get looks, body language, and the simple fact that Paulie never once tries to undermine Silvio's place as consigliere in any serious way. Even when Paulie feels passed over or insulted, he aims his anger upward, toward Tony, or sideways at younger guys. He does not scheme to replace Silvio in Tony's ear. Deep down, Paulie probably knows he can never do that job. The very fact that he accepts that truth shows a quiet respect. He may joke about Silvio's calmness or his business-like attitude, but he understands that Silvio's talents are real and needed. At the same time, There is no doubt that Paulie sometimes resents the calm authority in Silvio's tone. When Silvio speaks, people listen. When Paulie speaks, people may listen, but they also brace themselves for some over-the-top complaint. That difference in how others react to them shapes how they see each other. Silvio looks at Paulie and sees someone who will always be half clown, half killer. Paulie looks at Silvio and sees someone who will never have to scream to be heard. That hurts Paulie's pride, even if he cannot put it into words. So their relationship has this layer of unspoken pain, mixed into the respect and shared history. The later seasons make their bond even more clear by showing what happens when one of them falls. When Silvio is taken out of the picture and ends up in a hospital bed, Paulie does not suddenly rise up as some secret mastermind who always hated him. Instead, he looks uncomfortable, almost lost, as if a piece of the furniture of his life has been removed. He takes on new responsibility, he accepts a new crew, but there is a hollow feeling in the way he talks about the future. For all his talk about omens and signs, for all his superstition, Paulie chooses to keep going in a world where Silvio might never wake up. That choice shows that part of his love for Silvio is tied up with his love for the life itself. If he walks away now, then all those years they spent together at that table suddenly mean nothing. By staying, he keeps that shared past alive, even if one of them is no longer there to share it. The idea of love between them has to be understood in the context of that world. These men are not going to say, "I love you" to each other. Their love is shown by presence. Decade after decade, through all the wars, they stay in each other's lives. They show up to the same funerals, the same parties, the same secret meetings. They keep each other's secrets. They protect each other by refusing to even consider the idea of turning on one another. If they truly hated each other, one of them would have used one of the many moments of chaos to push the other off the board. That never happens. Whatever irritation, jealousy, or disappointment they feel, it never becomes true hatred. In the end, their dynamic is built on three pillars: shared past, shared duty, and shared fear. Their shared past gives them memories and stories that no one else understands in the same way. Their shared duty keeps them sitting at that table, doing that same dark job, year after year. Their shared fear, the knowledge that death or prison could come for either of them at any time, keeps them close even when they might want to drift apart. Each man knows that when the smoke clears after a bad week, the faces most likely still standing will be Tony, Silvio, and Paulie. That knowledge becomes its own kind of bond. So did they respect each other? Yes, but not in a simple way. Silvio respected Paulie's toughness, his loyalty, and his ability to put fear into people. Paulie respected Silvio's brain, his calm, and his position at Tony's side. Each of them also doubted the other's judgment and saw the other's flaws very clearly. That is the kind of respect that exists between veterans who have been in the trenches long enough to see each other at their worst and still show up to fight together the next day. Did they hate each other? At times, they were certainly annoyed, angry, and even disgusted with each other's behavior. Paulie could not stand how measured and political Silvio could be. Silvio could not stand how reckless and self-centered Paulie could be. But hate in that world usually leads to action. It leads to people being set up, or at least to open moves against them. That never happens between these two. Their feelings never sink all the way down into real hatred, because the things that connect them are stronger than the things that divide them. Did they love each other? In the language of that life, yes. They loved each other the way soldiers love other soldiers who have survived the same battles. It is not emotional or soft. It is a tired, cynical, hard-edged love that shows itself in loyalty, in patience, and in the refusal to imagine a life without the other man in it. When the last days come for their world, they are still sitting at the same table. That image tells us everything we need to know about their dynamic. For all the jokes, eye rolls, and behind-the-back complaints, Paulie Walnuts and Silvio Dante are linked by something deeper than friendship and deeper than business. They are two men who grew old in the same war, and whatever else they might feel about each other, they are bound by that fact until the end.